Starving girl called 911, but what arrived was more than just food. She thought she was just calling for a meal. What showed up changed her life forever. Amber's hands trembled as she held the phone. Her fingers slipped once, then again, before she could press three numbers. The house around her was still, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the shallow, uneven breathing of her little brother curled up beneath a threadbare blanket. She didn't want to make the call. Not because she didn't need help, she did. Desperately. But she was 13. She knew what could happen when you asked for help the wrong way. Her voice cracked into the silence. "We haven't eaten in days. Please, I don't know what else to do." The operator paused, the air between them thick with the weight of what wasn't being said. Then came a promise that someone was on their way. "Let's freeze this moment right here. What would you do? You're 13. Your mom, who never asks anyone for anything, is in a hospital bed. Your baby brother is crying from hunger, not tiredness. And outside your window it's quiet. No footsteps, no knock, no one coming. No food, no answers, just you. You know help won't come from the usual places. You know the names and numbers you were told to call. Those haven't worked. You've already tried. So now you're calling the number you always heard was for emergencies. But in your world, this is one. The real emergency, though, didn't start when Amber made that call. It began years before, with small things. Absences, decisions, sacrifices made one after another until there was nothing left to give. No fuel, no cushion, no room for even one bad day. That 911 call? It didn't just bring a warm meal. It brought something no one expected. Something powerful. Because when the dispatcher relayed the address, it passed through more than just systems and screens. It landed on someone's conscience. What happened next would lead to a chain of strangers doing things no one asked of them, but that none of them could forget. And for Amber, it meant more than just food on the table. It meant hope, when hope was the last thing she could afford to believe in. Have you ever seen kindness change a life? Tell me in the comments, because what you're about to hear might change how you see your neighbors forever. Amber M. Bigelow grew up in a place that barely showed up on maps. A single road sliced through town like a lifeline, with fields on either side that stretched for miles, and not much in between. In this small corner of America, everyone knew everyone else. Or thought they did. She lived in a two-bedroom house with chipped paint and a front porch that creaked every time someone stepped on it. The kind of place where the mailbox leaned sideways like it was tired of standing. Amber shared that house with her mother, Jeanette, and her two younger siblings, Isaac and Molly. Jeanette worked the night shift at a nursing home. Her uniform smelled faintly of bleach and lavender, one to clean, the other to cover up what couldn't be washed away. On paper, she was just another single mother doing her best, but in Amber's eyes, she was a fighter. The kind who got up before dawn and never complained when dinner was toast and peanut butter 3 nights in a row. The Bigelows lived off food stamps, government cheese, and whatever Jeanette could stretch between paychecks. Their pantry was more shelf than substance. Sometimes the kids would open it 5 or 6 times in an hour, hoping something new had magically appeared. It never did. Their clothes came from donation bins and thrift stores. Amber learned how to make holes look intentional. Distressed denim, she'd say, with a wink to Molly. But when kids at school laughed or called her free shelf, the smile would fade. Poverty leaves marks you can't always see. Quiet, invisible scars that sit behind a child's eyes. Amber learned to count coins with the precision of a banker and memorize the dates food assistance reloaded like it was a national holiday. She also learned how to act like everything was fine. Because kids notice things, and Amber noticed everything. She was thoughtful in a way that went far beyond her years. If there were 5 chicken nuggets, she'd eat one and give the rest to Isaac and Molly. She kept a notebook under her pillow, not filled with doodles or dream boards, but with meal plans, to-do lists, and sketches of a better life. In her mind, the future was something you planned for, even if the present kept falling apart. At night, Amber would lie awake staring at the ceiling while her mother coughed in the other room. It was a dry, rattling sound that echoed down the hallway. Sometimes Jeanette would muffle it with a pillow, not wanting to wake the kids, but Amber always heard. She listened for it, every night, like a signal that tomorrow might be harder than today. Despite all of it, Amber remained soft. She never turned bitter. She braided Molly's hair every morning and left notes in Isaac's lunchbox with smiley faces and hearts. She helped the neighbor carry groceries up the steps, even when her arms ached from holding her baby brother the night before. She was a girl who could have grown hard, but she didn't, and that's what made her special. Amber wasn't just the kind of kid who needed help. She was the kind who deserved it. But help didn't come. Not when Jeanette got sick, not when the electricity flickered, not when the fridge stayed empty for days. Until that call. until the day she pressed 911 on a dusty phone screen with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The world would remember Amber for that call, but to understand why it mattered, you have to understand who she was before it. It started with a fever. At first, Jeanette brushed it off. Just a cold, she told Amber. Just exhaustion from double shifts and stress. She sipped store-brand cough syrup and tied a scarf around her neck before heading into work. Amber watched her leave that night, shoulders hunched, legs slow. Something about the way her mother walked out the door made Amber's stomach twist. By morning, Jeanette couldn't get out of bed. Her breathing had grown shallow, ragged. She tried to sit up, to speak, but her words slurred. Amber ran to her, barely 13 years old, heart pounding in her chest. Her mother's forehead burned to the touch. Isaac stood frozen in the hallway, wide-eyed. Molly clutched a tattered teddy bear. An ambulance came. Flashing lights. A neighbor had called when Amber didn't show up at school. The EMTs asked questions Amber didn't have answers for. They lifted her mother onto a stretcher, wrapped in a blanket too thin to stop the shivering. Jeanette disappeared into the back of the ambulance, and the door slammed shut. That night, the house fell into silence. No adult voice calling out bedtime, no light seeping from under her mother's bedroom door. Just Amber, and two children who looked at her like she was supposed to know what to do. The fridge held one half-empty bottle of ketchup, 3 slices of sandwich bread that had gone stiff around the edges, and a single egg. Amber stood in front of it for a long time, the cold air brushing her face, as if maybe if she stared hard enough, something else would appear. Nothing did. For the next few days, Amber became the adult. She woke Isaac and Molly for school, walked them to the bus stop, and then came home to figure out how to stretch nothing into something. She counted out saltine crackers like gold coins. They each got 2. She dipped them in tap water to soften them, made it feel like soup. She told jokes at the table, silly ones that made no sense. Molly giggled, but Isaac's eyes lingered on the window, where frost was forming along the inside of the glass. The heater had stopped working 2 days earlier. There was no money to fix it, no firewood, no electric blanket. Amber layered her siblings in old coats and gloves and covered them with every towel in the house. Still, the cold crept in. It curled around their ankles and breathed against their necks while they slept. She huddled between them on the mattress in the living room, arms wrapped around their little bodies, her own skin numb and aching. Each day, she told them the same thing. Mommy called. She's doing better. She said there's surprise food coming soon. She smiled when she said it. She had to. If she didn't believe it, they wouldn't either. In truth, no one had called. The hospital was too far, the nurses too busy. No one explained anything to Amber. No one checked in. The days blurred. Hunger dulled her thoughts. Her stomach gnawed at itself, but she always made sure the others ate before she did. When the saltines ran out, she offered tap water in mismatched mugs. Special tea, she said with a wink. Molly asked why it didn't taste sweet like before. Maybe Mommy forgot the honey, Amber replied softly, tucking her sister's blanket around her shoulders. Each night, Amber sat up longer than she should, just listening, straining for the sound of the door opening, for the familiar cough, for any proof that things were about to get better. They didn't. It wasn't just the cold. It wasn't just the hunger. It was the loneliness, the sense that no one was coming, that the world had forgotten a little girl trying to be everything her mother couldn't be right now. By the 5th day, her lips were cracked. Her head throbbed. She'd stopped answering the knock at the door. It was usually just a flyer or a neighbor looking for Jeanette. She checked the cabinets again, just to be sure. Nothing had changed. Finally, with her hands shaking and her heart hammering in her chest, she picked up her mother's old phone. It had barely any charge left. She didn't want to call 911. She didn't want to make a scene. But her brother was crying from hunger in the next room, and her sister was coughing in her sleep. Amber looked at the screen, then pressed the numbers. 9-1-1. She paused before speaking, her voice no more than a whisper. "We haven't eaten in days. Please, I don't know what else to do." If you were Amber, would you have made the call? Let me know in the comments. And if this story is touching your heart, tap that like button. It helps us tell stories that matter. The numbers sat on the screen, glowing faintly in the dark room. 911. Amber's thumb hovered, unsure. It felt like crossing a line she'd been taught not to go near. Her mother had always said, "Don't bring attention unless it's life or death." But what was this then? Isaac had grown quiet, too tired to cry. Molly kept asking if today was the day Mommy came home. There was no more pretending. Amber pressed the green button. It rang once, then clicked. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was soft, patient. Amber didn't speak right away. Her voice caught. Her throat ached. When she finally found the words, they came out cracked and dry. "My mom's in the hospital, and we don't have any food." A pause. Her breath trembled. "I'm watching my brother and sister. I don't know what else to do." The dispatcher's voice stayed calm, steady. "Okay, sweetheart. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me your name?" "Amber." "How old are you, Amber?" She hesitated, ashamed. 13. There was silence on the line just for a moment. Then, "You're very brave for calling, Amber. Is there an adult with you?" She shook her head before realizing the dispatcher couldn't see her. "Number. It's just me and them." "Okay, thank you for telling me. Is your front door unlocked?" Amber glanced toward it. A gust of wind rattled the frame, and she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "It sticks a little, but I can try." "You don't have to do that just yet. Someone will be there soon. Can you stay on the phone with me until they arrive?" Amber nodded again, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Okay." Her hands were trembling so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She shifted to the floor beside the couch, where Molly lay bundled under two old towels, face pale. Isaac had curled into a tight ball, fast asleep, his mouth slightly open. "They're really hungry," she whispered. "I tried to make the crackers last, but—" "You did everything right, Amber," the dispatcher replied, voice like a blanket. "You're doing an amazing job." "I didn't want to call," Amber confessed, swallowing hard. "I thought, if I did, maybe they'd take us away, like from Mom." Another pause. "I understand that must be scary, but right now, the most important thing is keeping you and your siblings safe. You're not in trouble. You called because you care about them. That's what matters." A tear slid down Amber's cheek. She pressed her lips together to hold in the sob, but it slipped out anyway, quiet and helpless. "I'm so tired," she murmured. "I know," said the voice in her ear. "You're not alone anymore." The minutes passed slowly. The line stayed open. Amber sat there, clutching the phone in one hand, the other resting lightly on her sister's back. Every sound made her jump. A car passing, a creak in the floorboards. She kept glancing toward the door, heart beating hard in her chest. Would someone really come? She didn't know who they would be. A police officer, a woman with a clipboard, someone from a place she'd only heard about in whispers. Child services. Her breath quickened. What if they split them up? What if they didn't believe she could care for Isaac and Molly? What if calling had been a mistake? But another sound reached her ears. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching snow outside the porch. Her whole body went still. A knock. Amber held the phone tighter. "There's someone at the door." "Good," the dispatcher said gently. "That's them. You can go let them in now. I'll stay with you while you do." Amber stood on stiff legs, bones aching with hunger and cold. She walked slowly toward the front of the house. The lock stuck, just like she said. She leaned into it, shoulder pressing hard, until the door creaked open. And there, in the yellow glow of the porch light, stood a woman in a heavy coat, a warm smile on her face, in her hands, bags of groceries. Behind her, another figure, tall in uniform, with calm eyes and a quiet stance. "Are you Amber?" the woman asked. Amber nodded. The tears came faster now, not silent anymore. She didn't try to stop them. "We brought food," the woman said. "We're here to help." Amber stepped aside, heart still racing, hands still trembling, but just enough space to let them in. Amber expected one person, maybe two. A clipboard, a few awkward questions, a car ride somewhere cold and unfamiliar. That was how stories like this usually went. She had heard them in school, in whispered conversations. Kids gone one day, their desks empty the next. But what arrived wasn't a social worker or just an officer. It was headlights. Not one set, but several. Red and blue flashes danced across the snow-covered street, then faded into warm beams from plain cars and vans. Engines hummed as doors opened and boots crunched through ice. Voices called out, soft, not sharp. No one barked instructions. No one looked angry or afraid. The first responder through the door handed Amber a plastic grocery bag, its handles straining from the weight of canned soup, pasta, juice, bread, peanut butter. "Where should we put the rest?" someone asked behind him. Amber blinked. The rest? More people stepped inside. Two men in fire department jackets, a woman with a sheriff's badge, a teenager carrying bags from the local grocery, a nurse from the town clinic holding a folded blanket under each arm. Someone brought a portable heater and set it near the window to block the draft. Another unfurled a sleeping bag across the floor for Isaac. Molly stirred, rubbed her eyes, and sat up slowly. She sniffed the air. Something different was filling the house. Not just heat. Something else. "Is that food?" she whispered. It was. A woman Amber didn't recognize stepped forward with a foil tray that smelled like chicken and rice and warmth. A man behind her held a crock pot. Another carried paper plates and bottled water. Amber didn't move at first. It was too much. Too sudden. Her body hadn't caught up to what was happening. She turned to the woman from earlier, the one who had first knocked on the door. "Why are they all here?" The woman knelt to Amber's level and brushed a strand of hair gently behind her ear. "Because you were brave. You spoke up. And we heard you." Amber's throat tightened. "But we're not special. You don't have to be special to be cared for." She watched as Isaac stirred awake and looked around, confused, his eyes wide. Molly giggled as someone handed her a plush blanket in her favorite color. One of the responders had brought a small bag of toys. Nothing new, just gently used items donated from a local church. But to the kids, it might as well have been Christmas. More cars pulled up outside. Word had spread fast. The local pastor arrived with 2 space heaters and a message from his congregation. "Tell Amber we're here if she needs us." A man from the hardware store carried a stack of heavy blankets and a bundle of firewood. The owner of the thrift shop dropped off 2 coats, clean, warm, and the right sizes. Amber stood at the edge of it all, wrapped in an oversized hoodie someone had handed her, unsure whether to cry or disappear. People were talking, laughing softly, filling her house with a noise it hadn't heard in weeks. "Life," she whispered to the same woman from earlier. "Will they take us away now?" "No," came the answer. "They'll help your mom, and they'll help you until she's better. You get to stay together." Amber swallowed hard. "But what if we don't deserve all this?" "You called because your siblings were hungry. That tells me everything I need to know about you." A hand touched her shoulder gently. Another responder, a young man with kind eyes, added, Everyone in this room showed up because one girl cared more about others than herself. Amber didn't know how to respond. She hadn't meant to start anything. She'd just called because Isaac hadn't eaten in 2 days, because she couldn't keep lying to Molly, because her hands were shaking from fear and hunger and something worse, helplessness. But now people were coming. They kept coming. Outside, one of the officers had shoveled a path through the snow, leading up to the porch. Another was knocking on neighbors' doors, asking if anyone else nearby needed help. Inside, someone fixed the kitchen light. Someone else found the leak under the sink and promised to return with tools. Amber sat down beside her siblings. Molly leaned against her. Isaac, too tired to say anything, laid his head in her lap. The plate in front of them steamed gently. Amber watched them eat. She didn't touch her food at first. She just watched. Something had shifted in her chest. Not completely. Not yet. But enough. Enough to feel it, like a weight lifting just enough for her to breathe again. And outside, past the frosted windows, the porch light stayed on. The cars stayed parked. No one was in a rush to leave. By morning, everyone in Bigelow had heard the story. Not the kind that traveled through gossip or suspicion. This story passed from heart to heart, shared in line at the diner, whispered in pews, mentioned between grocery aisles. It was retold with tears, with pride, with a feeling none of them could quite name. People didn't talk about Amber like she was a symbol. They spoke of her like she was theirs. The girl who had called, the one who hadn't asked for toys or money or even for herself. Just food, just a little help. For her brother and sister. It did something to the town. The following Sunday, the pastor at the First Community Church stood before his congregation, voice trembling. He didn't read from scripture that morning. He read from a list. Cans of soup, mac and cheese, diapers, baby wipes, gas cards, winter boots. By next weekend, he said, we're going to fill every shelf downstairs. If Amber's family needed help, you can be sure others do too. Let's not wait for another call. That week, a room below the church turned into a lifeline. They called it the corner cupboard. Within days, the shelves sagged with generosity, lined with cans, cereals, soap, warm socks, and boxes of baby formula. Donations didn't just come from church-goers. The local cafe offered gift cards for meals. The high school's woodworking class built sturdy wooden shelves and hand-painted signs. A teenager with a pickup truck volunteered to make weekly deliveries for anyone who couldn't leave their home. At Amber's school, the principal made a quiet announcement over the intercom. If you or someone you know could use a little help, come see us. No judgment, no names, just care. By Friday, a cardboard box sat in every classroom, wrapped in brown paper and marked with bold, bright letters. The Bigelow box. Kids brought what they could: granola bars, toothpaste, gently worn gloves, juice boxes. One girl slipped in a handwritten card for someone who might need a friend. The idea grew. The town council designated a small building downtown as the first official community pantry. Local businesses contributed. A retired accountant helped manage inventory. Volunteers signed up for shifts. No family went hungry that winter. Not one. As for Amber's family, they stayed together. Her mother recovered slowly. The hospital kept her longer than expected, but the news was good. Pneumonia, yes, but also exhaustion, untreated anxiety, years of running on empty. She left with antibiotics, referrals, and something more. A community that refused to let her fall through the cracks again. The apartment, once frigid and dim, became something closer to a home. The windows were patched, the heat stayed on. The pantry stayed stocked, thanks to quiet knockoffs and anonymous drops left by neighbors who expected nothing in return. Amber's siblings began to laugh again, Molly joined a reading group at school. Isaac started drawing, crayon murals of houses with smiling faces and open doors. Amber herself changed in quiet ways. She didn't become loud or boastful. That wasn't her. But her posture shifted. Her eyes steadied. She began helping with the church pantry on weekends. She folded blankets, sorted canned goods, handed out hot chocolate with a confidence she hadn't known she carried. People greeted her differently, too, not out of pity, but with respect, with recognition. She was the girl who had changed something, who reminded them that silence wasn't strength, that asking for help could be the bravest thing of all. Some days she still worried. That didn't vanish overnight. But the burden wasn't hers alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The story didn't stop in Bigelow. A local journalist picked it up. One short article in the county paper, then a segment on a regional radio show, a video clip that spread online. Amber's voice, soft but clear, recounting how she had dialed 3 numbers and stayed on the line while help found its way to her door. People reached out from other towns, asking how to start their own Bigelow box. One school in a neighboring county launched a kindness drive named after Amber. Another set up a scholarship fund for youth caregivers. But for Amber, it wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about being remembered. It was about never hearing her brother's stomach growl in silence again. About never telling Molly another story just to buy time for food that wouldn't come. It was about knowing now without doubt that help did come, and it kept coming. If one little girl's courage could move an entire town, imagine what we could do if we all looked out for each other. What's one act of kindness you've witnessed? Share it in the comments. Amber never forgot the way her hands had trembled as she picked up the phone. She never forgot the silence on the other end of the line before the 911 dispatcher spoke, or how long those minutes felt before help arrived. She carried that memory with her, not as a wound, but as a thread that wove through everything she would later become. In the months after her mother came home from the hospital, life in their small apartment slowly stabilized. The heat stayed on. Groceries filled the fridge. Homework replaced hunger pangs. Her siblings giggled over cartoons again. Amber returned to being a child, but not entirely. Something inside her had changed. She started noticing things other kids missed. A classmate whose hoodie was always 2 sizes too small. A boy who didn't eat lunch unless someone else shared. A girl who came to school tired, smelling of cigarette smoke and something more hollow. Neglect. Amber didn't look away. She couldn't. By the time she was 12, she was helping pack food boxes at the corner cupboard after school. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she remembered what it meant to be hungry and forgotten. The pantry volunteers treated her like one of their own. Some even joked she should run the place someday. She didn't laugh them off. She spoke at her first community event when she was 14. It was supposed to be a quick thank you speech at the church fundraiser, but when she stepped up to the mic, people leaned in. She spoke quietly, not with bravado, but with a steadiness that silenced the room. I was scared to ask for help, she said, but someone picked up the phone. Someone came. And that day changed everything. So now, I help too. From that moment on, she wasn't just the girl who had once called 911. She was Amber, the one who showed up with a cart full of meals on Saturdays, who sat with nervous kids at the shelter and showed them how to make paper snowflakes, who could calm a crying toddler in seconds. She never missed a Thanksgiving at the community pantry. Not once. Even during finals. Even in the middle of snowstorms. She remembered too well the Thanksgiving when there had been nothing but tap water and stale crackers. Now she made sure no family in Bigelow faced that silence alone. Her work wasn't confined to her town. At 16, she began writing letters to school boards, mayors, food bank networks. She didn't complain. She asked questions, pointed out gaps, proposed ideas. When the state senator visited Bigelow for a photo op, Amber cornered her in the church basement and pitched a statewide version of the Bigelow box. The senator didn't forget. A year later, Amber received a scholarship. Full ride, social work. Her essay didn't quote statistics. It told a story. She wrote about the night she fed her siblings saltines and tap water and told them magic food was on the way. She wrote about the knock on the door, about the flood of warmth, not just from the heaters, but from the people who refused to let her stay invisible. She closed her essay with a promise. I will not waste what was given to me. I will make sure no child ever has to feel what I felt. In college, Amber spent weekends mentoring middle schoolers who were caring for sick parents or raising younger siblings. She taught them what she had once needed to hear, that asking for help isn't weakness, that surviving is noble, that service heals. Professors described her as determined, intuitive, and grounded. But to the people who had known her from the beginning, she was still just Amber, the girl with the soft voice and sharp eyes who had turned fear into fuel. By 22, she was speaking at regional conferences, not with fanfare, not for applause, just with the quiet power of someone who had lived the need and answered it. People listened, policymakers, teachers, donors, teenagers, because Amber didn't talk about poverty like a problem to be fixed from a distance. She spoke about it like a childhood memory, a shared truth, a thing you walk through, not around. She never pointed fingers. She pointed forward. She returned home every summer, volunteering like she always had, stocking shelves, handing out backpacks, hugging old neighbors. She never stopped helping, not because she couldn't leave Bigelow behind, but because she chose not to. This was where it started, and as far as she was concerned, this was where it would continue. The girl who once whispered for help had grown into a woman who now made sure help never came too late. Amber wasn't extraordinary in the way the world often defines it. She didn't go viral. She didn't rise to fame. But she did something harder. She turned hunger into purpose, loneliness into leadership. And in doing so, she changed the story, not just for herself, but for every child who came after her. Years passed, cities changed. So did Amber. She graduated, moved, worked in places that had more traffic lights than trees. She met others who carried childhoods stitched with silence, scarcity, and the kind of courage no child should have to summon. Her calendar filled with speaking events and outreach planning, her inbox with messages from young people asking how to make a difference. But no matter where she went, there was a tug, gentle, persistent, a pull back to the quiet streets of Bigelow, back to the place where it had all begun. On a mild autumn afternoon, she parked outside the familiar red brick building that once held cardboard boxes and second-hand coats. Now it bore her name, the Amber Reyes Community Pantry. The letters on the sign weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. Everyone in town already knew who she was. She hadn't asked for the honor, hadn't even known they were naming it after her. The volunteers surprised her with the plaque after her first year in college. She had cried then, quietly, behind the storage shelves, more overwhelmed by love than pride. Inside it looked different, yet the same. Brighter lighting, fresh paint, more shelves. But the feeling remained. Warmth, welcome, safety. The scent of tomato soup simmering in the kitchen, crayons scattered on a kid's table near the front desk, hand-labeled boxes of cereal and granola bars stacked with care. She wandered through slowly, stopping to greet volunteers who still remembered the tiny girl with oversized hand-me-downs and tired eyes. Now they called her Miss Amber. It made her laugh every time. In the back corner, she spotted a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, organizing snack packs into a large rolling cart. Her backpack had little stars embroidered on the straps, and her braids bounced as she worked. Amber knelt beside her. "You're doing a great job," she said gently. The girl turned, startled at first, then smiled. Thanks. I'm helping my grandma today. She lets me be in charge of the backpacks. Amber grinned. That's a very important job. The girl nodded, serious. Some kids don't get snacks at home. I used to be one of them. Amber's chest tightened, but she kept her voice soft. You're not anymore. The girl shook her head. Nope. I get a backpack every Friday now, with cereal and applesauce and those little raisins I like. My teacher told me it's because of you. Amber blinked. Before she could respond, the girl added in a whisper, You're the reason I have food in my backpack. For a moment, time fell away. Amber saw herself again, 10 years old, gripping a landline phone, whispering into the void, terrified of being taken, of losing everything, and yet more terrified of staying silent. She remembered the wind howling through the cracked window, the empty cupboards, the lies she told to keep her siblings from crying. She hadn't imagined that one call would ripple into all this. Amber reached out and tucked one of the girl's braids behind her ear. No, sweetheart, she said softly. You're the reason I keep going. The girl beamed, then skipped off to show her grandma how many backpacks she had filled. Amber stood, watching her disappear into the rows of shelves and kindness. Outside, the leaves rustled. A boy's laughter echoed through the parking lot. Somewhere down the block, church bells rang in the hour. Amber stepped into the afternoon light and took a long breath. She had once believed that asking for help might tear her family apart. Instead, it had built something stronger, lasting. Now the pantry stood not just as a place to receive, but a place to belong. A place where children didn't have to pretend, where no one was invisible, where a single voice, no matter how young or scared, could echo louder than anyone imagined. She had come full circle, not as a visitor or a guest, but as part of the soil, rooted here, grown here, giving back what was once given freely to her. And it wasn't just food in backpacks or heaters in living rooms anymore. It was hope. It was proof that one child's courage could nourish a whole town, that asking for help wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. It didn't begin with a movement, or a campaign, or a plan. It began with a voice, small, unsteady, pressed against the weight of fear and hunger. A little girl dialing a number she wasn't sure would help, whispering into a phone because her siblings needed warmth, and she had nothing else to give. There was no script for bravery that day, no spotlight, just one child choosing courage over silence. And from that voice came a wave. One by one they answered. First responders, teachers, shopkeepers, neighbors. Not because they had to, but because someone asked for help and they chose to listen. And once they heard, they couldn't unhear. They couldn't look away. That's how it begins. Not with fanfare, but with a knock on a cold door and a bag of groceries. A blanket passed from one hand to another. A promise made. You are not alone. Amber never set out to change her town. She only wanted her brother to stop crying, her sister to have breakfast. But in speaking up, she cracked open something bigger, a community's heart. It turns out, compassion is contagious. Her story reminds us, you don't need a title to make change. You don't need permission to be kind. And you don't need to be loud to be brave. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the quietest. Sometimes it's the smallest act, one call, one yes, one open door, that reshapes the lives around us. In a world often moving too fast to notice the hungry, the hurting, or the forgotten, Amber's story asks us to slow down, to look, to listen, to care, because anyone can be that voice. Any one of us can be the start of something better. So, if you ever wonder whether you matter, whether your actions make a difference, remember the girl who whispered for help. She didn't know the world was about to shift. She just knew she couldn't wait any longer. And because she spoke, others stood up. And because they stood up, no child in her town went cold that winter. And because of that winter, the warmth never left. If Amber's story moved you, share this video with someone who believes in the power of kindness. Subscribe for more real-life stories that show how even the smallest acts can change everything.